Alrighty, welcome to the Express Technical Committee meeting for August the 14th. Due to some changes in YouTube support, we are not live streaming this at all, but we still have this as a recording that will be on our YouTube channel. We're going to basically go down some of the things that were kind of left off / started from the last time. So we have some discussion about the package management working group top priority list of stuff, which is the thing we talked about last time where, labeling issues and things, and we had like an initial list. We wanted to at least discuss some of the TypeScript stuff. So that was one of the takeaways from last time as well, which is, adding TypeScript support, which is something that we want to do. And so there's some ideas about how to go about it, and figure we just touch on it. And then additionally, as time allots, we wanted to touch on automation via GitHub Actions / GitHub CI, which are both recently expanding on GitHub, helping us with some of the different things that we're doing by hand, and touching on the request prototype stuff from, I think, a couple meetings ago. Thoughts on utilizing the Node.js's Slack workspace for potentially Express. And the last item on our agenda is some status board project. There's an issue for that, but otherwise we'll get started on the top priority list. So I don't know, Wes, if you want to take it or not, since I know you had provided your top priority issue starter list.
So I have that list, but I think one thing that I'd like to maybe tie into this is the thing that we talked about in the last meeting was utilizing tags to keep this list. So I had this list of ones that I posted in the last conversation. But since then, I worked on the status board. So that was the last thing I added.
Yep.
So what this does is it goes through all of our repos, pulls all of the issues, and then makes lists based on the tags. So right now, we don't have any tagged with top priority, which is what we kind of had agreed on. But if we did, I could go and rerun that builder, and it would then have the list on the status board page. This is totally a work in progress, but I think this would be a good time for us to, if we like the idea of running this all through those tags, go and start tagging them. So I guess that would be the next step if we all agree.
Yep, I think, and I feel like we did end up agreeing to that last time to use labels to track these things. And I know that was one of the ideas was in conjunction with said status board, where it would just aggregate all of our issues. But even if we didn't have the status board, we can easily just have a link to a GitHub search query that shows, the issues or pull requests or whatever, basically labeled with that label, in our orgs.
Definitely.
And that would be kind of the way to just expose it versus having it, in an issue comment and just, everybody editing the same comment. Because then it would also, I think, can help get it tracked across. But and I think that is totally the right thing to do. I know that you had suggested, I think you said it in your status board one, a label called high priority, which makes as good as name as any, I guess, for a label name. I didn't know if you said it or not, but I know you mentioned potentially some software that could add the labels across the repos.
So I did some research into that, and I put a thing here. So, actually, this is a different one. So there's two. So with the actions, there's a new thing that opened up, which is this labeler action, which looks at PRs and tags them. I don't know if we could reuse the same thing, or if we want, I also looked at that. What's it called? The bot thing. You Probot. So I got that set up on one of my other repos, and it seems to work well. So that I think would be a good one to add triage. I think we had said triage or needs triage or something like that.
Right. Yeah. You're talking
Um,
about like, yes, because I know that was, because that came from like the question where, we talked about how, people, like if people want to get involved by helping us triage, like part of the thing is like, well, what do they need a triage? And
yep.
it makes sense because I think a lot of people coming in won't be like literally subscribed to the repo, therefore getting an email when a new issue is open. So at least having
Yep.
that makes sense. I
So
do remember talking about that.
if we like the idea, I can start turning on these bots. I'll make a test repo that we'll turn it on first, and we can mess around with. Um, and I was looking at this labeler bot that is the GitHub action is actually quite a bit more robust. So you can actually have it run on all the webhooks available on GitHub repos, and then do some more complicated stuff written in JavaScript to respond to that. So the labeler one actually looks at the commit, sees if the file's change matches a glob pattern, and then adds labels based on the glob pattern. So in this case, it would be like, was the README touched? Add a README tag, right? But we could easily change that to do all the stuff we talked about last time, which was like, if there's not a if there's not a history, like a changelog entry, tag it as needs changelog. If there's not and then we could add just a series of these as a GitHub action. So I think that's probably the best way forward.
Yep. And yeah, that's
Because
actually
then we
really
could just have it
awesome.
all in one spot.
Right. Because, yeah, like you said, especially if we can put like some custom JavaScript in there, like it's only going to be like a little bit,
Yeah.
but like, at least it'll be, something. Um,
Yep. So if we're good with that, then I can start working on that. I was already going to dig into the actions. That was part of the reason why I asked for us to be in the beta, because I think that this was the perfect solution for what we talked about. So I'm happy to start getting that turned on the. I don't know if do we want to make a test repo, or do we want to use one of the lower traffic ones?
no, I mean, if you think about it, right, like really, like I think we mentioned this before, like, yeah, the labeler I don't think has any real like downsides. You know what I mean? I think that is a
Yeah.
pretty like, yeah, like it certainly is not going to interfere with anything, or it's just going to have some labels or some crap. So,
Yep. Yep.
in fact, especially if we're talking about like just trying it out on something with pull requests, I think we need to put probably, if we're going to quote try it out first, right? It needs to be somewhere that will actually get pull requests.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, Theoretically, we could see which one got the newest pull requests, but I mean, probably something like, the Express repo probably is the most likely to, because pull requests happen here and there all over the place, like, so it's hard to really predict where they're going to come from. But I mean, we can just start, if we only want to try it on one just to get it down, like we can try the Express repo. Like you said with your test repo, if we wanted to put it somewhere where then we make like, nonsense pull requests just to make sure it works,
Right.
that would definitely make more sense to be like, just create a temporary repository and do it there to get the
Okay.
config right. But if we're not
Okay.
worried about that,
I can, if everybody's good with that, I will do that, because I think my only hesitation with putting it on the Express repo, if we're just trying it out, is churn. It'll be annoying if we have a bunch of issues come in that get labeled and we have to go manually delete them because I screwed it up or something.
gotcha. Yeah, and like you can
So
just make the repo, in our org.
yeah, well, I have to. So that was one of the things that it was a little
Okay.
bone to pick with I was like, I had applied for the actions thing, so I was going to test it out on my account, but then they said, oh, well, apply under Express's org, and I said, okay, I'll do what you want, but that means I can't even make a test repo on my own personal GitHub. I have to do it on the Express org as it stands, which means in this case we don't have it on Pillar or JSHTTP. So I was going to probably have to go back to them and say, hey, really, we need it on all these. Like, can you, what can you
So
do? So
they only enabled it. So they enabled it on an org. I got it. So that's probably why
yep, exactly.
it popped up to me. I didn't really make the dots that those actions weren't on other orgs.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm sure they'll do it.
Yeah,
Because it was really easy. I had submitted an issue to their starter kit to set up like the default node versions to be all the long-term support ones instead of just the 12. So that was like on that issue, I just said, hey, I can't even run this. Can you, we'd like to do this on Express. Can you get it turned on? So I'm sure if I just went back there, they would be happy to do it. So then that leads to the rest of the actions. We could start transitioning all the things that we do CI wise. So like Travis even to use GitHub Actions. I'm not sure how much effort we'd want to put into something like that, but the nice thing about it is it would be it would be more integrated into our repos, right? So you'd get you could do a lot more with what it's doing. You can run them from the UI here. You don't have to go over to Travis. Turning it on is all in the GitHub UI. I don't know how people feel about that, but
Sorry, for which part? I was kind of
so for like running tests, I guess would be the first
yeah.
thing that we do.
Running tests like
so
in Travis you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Or in GitHub CI you're talking about?
Yeah. We would the idea would be to transition them to GitHub CI.
Gotcha. Yeah,
as opposed to Travis.
Right, and I mean, I was just talking about someone this today. I mean, they're like, yeah, I think that makes sense. I know that there was potentially like the potential jump point from Travis CI to somewhere else looked like it could have been Azure. It was kind of annoying because you'd have to make entire separate accounts. Supposedly they have like a little bit more streamlined where now you can actually log in with GitHub. Though I think you still have a Microsoft account as well, and you just link them, which is not as streamlined, but at least still you can still just
that's for the Azure setup,
correct.
right?
But
okay,
yeah. But GitHub CI, like obviously that's integrated anyways. I don't have any experience with that, but I think remember Travis is pretty simplistic, right? So it's not like an Azure is really much more featureful. Whether or not we'll use the features is certainly to be seen, but we're not dying. We're working just fine with Travis. So, I mean, it's not like, we're taking a step back. So, I mean, I think that, GitHub CI is definitely something to explore. The reason I bring up stuff like the user logins is because it just makes it just makes it easier in the end, for managing a bunch of people and, just it could just have just one place to manage it rather than 1,000 different things going on.
I completely agree. And that's why I see this as being sort of a good long-term direction. And I was just looking because I think one of the reasons why they were talking about moving to Azure was to get some Windows coverage. But I think that GitHub CI has Windows runners.
Yeah, well, so for the major repos like Express, we do run on Windows through AppVoyeur.
Right.
Not that's an okay experience, I think, personally, and it has problems like, there isn't GitHub logins, and that's why I made a big deal of it because I know exactly that nonsense that's going on with, Travis, or not Travis, AppVoyeur, and I don't want to have to deal with that more than I have to. So yeah, especially if that can.
So I just dropped a link in the chat in here.
Yep.
It does support Windows Server 2019, Windows Server 2016, Ubuntu 18 and 16, and Mac OS. So we could actually run with GitHub CI in all of those environments.
Sweet.
And it's really easy to set up. It's a YAML file in the repo. So you set up the matrix,
right,
which just lists probably most of these. And then it spins up Docker containers, I think, or something on their server for those.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think
so that would actually simplify our setup across the board. We would be able to get rid of the AppVoyeur thing.
Yeah.
We'd,
yeah,
move it all.
Right. And like I said, I really hate having the AppVoyeur thing in the first place because it's literally under my own account because there's no good way to do it otherwise. It's ridiculous. And so I really hate that. And so I would love to make it, just the same way like Travis is and everything. So,
okay, well, so would there be a good repo? I mean, I could again do just the test repo and set it all up, and then we could decide which repos to go and apply this to moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, technically, right? If it can go purely off of a file, like Travis does, I mean, we can do it right on. Suppose theoretically, we can do it right on like Express from the get go, right? Because a pull
We could,
request
yeah.
made with the thing, and then it would just run it on the pull request because it's all the file or whatever. And yeah,
Yep. The only it would be the same kind of thing as if it was messed up, we'd cause some churn. It's committing a file, so it would then,
sure,
you
but
know,
that's what I'm saying. If it just looks for the file in like a pull request, we don't even have to like do anything at that point. You know what I mean? Suppose
right.
potentially.
If it runs off the pull request version, not
Right.
the master branch. Right,
Yeah,
right, right. Okay.
because Travis
Yep.
CI will do that. All you have to do is basically tick, because Travis CI is basically monitor this repo, and then, the default, though I always put that setting anyways, is that don't run it unless there's a .travis.yaml file.
Hmm.
Therefore, and then at that point you could make a pull request, and then it runs it on that pull request.
Okay.
But if
Yeah,
we're not sure if
I'll
it works like
try
that,
to
we
pull
can
that
always
together.
try it somewhere else first if we really want to. So
I'm pretty sure it works like that. I'll open up the PR then. It should be pretty straightforward.
cool. Because other options, if you're being conservative, other options, if we're especially if we're restricted to the GitHub or the Express.js GitHub org, is like some of the middlewares or something like that. If we want to try it
Yeah, yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
first. And some
Yeah,
of
I'll
those are simple. You know what I mean?
as long as nobody worries about me making a repo, I'd rather just start there so that if there's caveats or something, we don't have to, you know, we're not emailing people and getting a lot of people involved if it ends up being sort of a not ready yet, because it is a
Gotcha.
beta tool as well. So, it's possible that they could have
Yeah,
bugs and stuff. So,
I have no issue making repo for it, especially if the repo like is obvious as a test repo. Because
yeah,
um, like GitHub CI testing. Uh,
perfect.
and
Okay.
you can even like literally push up like one of the middleware source codes to it or something
Oh,
if you
great.
wanted to have something
Yeah.
real to test on.
Yep. That's a great idea. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to do it. So I'll do that. It'll probably be this weekend. And that at least will get that started. I'll also enable things like the labeler bot and see if there's any other community ones. So I was looking. It doesn't have the same breadth as that Pro bot as far as different types of features yet because it's new. But we can write our own. They're really simple to write. JavaScript and a YAML file is all you need. Um, so
Sweet.
yep, cool. So
Yeah.
that covers sort
Yep.
of a two topic. We just jumped a
Right.
bit, but if we're comfortable with that for using the actions, that means I can do the labeler and the CI stuff all in one, test repo and to get us started. So
Cool. Yeah, and if that ends that topic, I know one thing that we should probably definitely at least touch on is the TypeScript stuff, especially since Blake is here. Blake, I don't know if you want to kick it off or not, but I wanted to at least say, like, I think I meant to reply to it, but I think it was you who suggested it, like, where to start from. I think that makes a lot of sense, is that, start from, especially because we have, the repos across the three orgs. Like, if we start making TypeScript definitions for the repos that especially don't have any dependencies, that makes the most sense, since like some of those bigger repos like Express would probably kind of need the definitions from some of its sub dependencies anyways. So working, bottom up, that, makes sense to me.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much what I was suggesting. There's nothing major that I want to talk about on this, except I don't know how much support we have, if it's just me doing it or if there's anyone else interested or ready to do this. But otherwise, if we're on board with doing this, we should probably just discuss how we want to test it and what like the minimum requirements are for supporting TypeScript. Um, Aside from that, I already know enough that I can just run with it and help anyone else that's interested in helping.
Sweet. I would say
can
that,
I just say
yeah, go
from a
ahead.
helping perspective, this is specifically what the package maintenance working group wants. So if you're looking for, if you can give like one issue that gives direction, and then I can go and open, they have a board over there that they're sending people to, and they say, hey, I want to help, but tell me how. I can kick off that. I just need something to send them to that says like, this is what you should do.
What should that one issue look like? Should it just be like a long list of like all the repos with check marks or something, and we can just be like, these are the repos and kind of order that we're thinking about, say from like 0 dependencies to most dependencies, and then start checking off that list with which have definitions?
That seems reasonable to me. I think it might also help to have just a description of what those PR should look like, maybe.
Okay.
But other than that, because maybe I'm just missing the boat since I don't know enough about TypeScript, but to know. But if I was coming in, I would need some instructions on like, what is the minimum, like you were saying, what is the minimum requirements here? What should I be doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Should we discuss the minimum requirements that you want?
Yeah. So, because that's what I'm definitely interested. And like, someone like me, right? Like, I don't use it regularly. I like writing TypeScripts from a technical perspective is not over my head. I can do that. I just, you know what I mean? So I think like part of it comes down to, and why I've always hesitated to just do it myself is because I don't know the TypeScript community. And I think that is definitely where, Blake, you could probably help give some direction. Like, so just as an example from an outsider perspective, like myself, like I know that there's multiple versions of TypeScript, and I know there was the whole thing about like whether you should say like strict nulls or something like that, and what the best practices around there, and even just like what interfaces do you make that people like usually expect to have there, and which what things do you export. I think that we had some discussion on an issue like a long time ago. I think it might have been raw body or something like that, but like it's like, oh, make these options as like this type, and then so that you can export it so people can reference the type of an options object or something, and having things around that is definitely, I think, where you could probably provide guidance to help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So path to regex is like the one repo that I write pretty much everything in. So that is probably the one repo that does have a lot of this already. It has like TypeScript definitions that are like fairly well written, as well as like tests for it. I don't know how people feel about like having the tests in TypeScript, or versus just like having TypeScript tests and JavaScript tests and things like that.
Yeah, I've noticed that seems to be like, so testing is basically kind of like and that's always kind of like what gets me stuck a little bit too, right? Because like the whole point of writing a TypeScript definition is basically you're saying, well, I'm not writing the module in TypeScript, I'm writing it in JavaScript. But then at the same time, I always feel like, well, if your stance is to do that, then you're probably writing your test suite in JavaScript too. But then if you don't have something written in TypeScript, how do you test the types? Because that's, I've seen the things like, I think you've probably seen it where, those, that TypeScript definitions, big monolithic repo thing,
Mm-hmm.
definitely typed. Yeah. They have tests, but what they do is you just write a whole bunch of nonsense in a file and just say, and it just says like, from my understanding of just, does it compile? If so, you're good. And that's all it does, which I guess is something, but I could easily see how that could miss things. Like, if a type is I've seen, because I think that's why it runs all the time. Like an example of where someone defines the type as a string, but it could take a null too. And probably your test suite does test that. But unless someone realized all that, they would have just written the TypeScript test to have a string in there, tested that the thing had a string, and then gone their merry way. I don't know. I don't know. Like, to your point, like, it's hard to, it kind of feels like the only real, quote, good solution there is almost like that if you truly want a good test suite for it, you basically have to convert your existing test suite into TypeScript itself and let that, by proxy, test your definitions.
So I'm not a huge fan of that idea. I just, that seems like A long-term commitment to supporting a types file seems fine. A long-term commitment to writing tests in TypeScript doesn't, right? Like I'm not saying the TypeScript's going to die, but if it did, like CoffeeScript, then we've committed to something that is not great, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean that's why it's a tricky topic, right? Because one, we're also talking about like tests and like because like the reason why we're focusing on tests, right, is just to reduce the human burden, right? Because if you make a separate TypeScript file, it's almost like it's up to the human to like stare at the pull request, be like, oh, you changed a function signature, and I as a human recognize that you did not update the TypeScript definition file, right? I think that we can generally do that. Certainly more stuff going on. But it certainly is possible. All right. I just got a pop-up that said they're allowing us to talk for more than 40 minutes gracefully since it's our first meeting. Anyways, the and that's what's hard. But at the same, like, and I can see your argument too, and I think the same way. But then, like, the only other thought I can come up with in my mind too is like, I've seen plenty of people who will write effectively a test suite in a separate language. I'll give an example of like, what is it, Cucumber or something. I think Cucumber is kind of an example of that, where like, it has a lot of DSL, and so it's almost like it's a separate language in a lot of respects. When you're writing the Cucumber tests in like Ruby. So I mean, but yes, to your point though, it also, that's the other hesitation, right? Is that I assume that to run the test suite then, you would have to either have a first step that compiles all the tests back to JavaScript, or you can't support node versions that are below whatever the TypeScript compiler supports. You know what I mean? So like TypeScript, say 3.0. I don't know what exact version of TypeScript's out. I don't know if 3.0 is out. I think it might be out.
Yeah.
But say 4.0. 4.0 comes out. There's a bunch of stuff, but requires Node.js 12 or up. Say, I don't know. So then at that point, if we wanted to like up, if we were just running it all inline during our test suite, we'd have to consider, well, do we just keep using the old version of TypeScript, or do we, release new versions of our stuff to drop support for Node less than 12 so we can do that, or come up with some weird Frankenstein system? I'm not saying that we would have an answer right now. I'm just thinking out loud. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't the standard practice be to transpile your code down to whatever version of ECMAScript you want to support before? Like, you normally would be testing the package that you're going to publish, right? Like, you wouldn't be testing TypeScript build code most of the time. Is that not typical?
No,
I don't really know.
And that's what I was kind of like pointing out, is like, you'd have to have like, so say like we had a matrix. That my thought was like, we have a matrix of say like 8 node versions, say, and only the last 3 of them is what TypeScript will actually run on. So
when you say run on, you mean compile down to compatibility, right?
No,
That's what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the TypeScript compiler itself.
Yeah, so we could actually, so this probably won't ever be a concern because TypeScript actually has really good support for old node versions. They're like, but if you did have that concern, you can actually, especially if we move to GitHub Actions, you can actually run and transpile it on a step beforehand on like a modern node version, and then run the test on different node versions. So just like split up the 2 steps.
Right. That's what I was saying, is that's what basically we'd have to do, is we'd have to say, prior to running all tests, run this basically pre-step that would then do the compilation down to your ECMAScript, and then actually run your tests. So that would basically be, Travis CI, I think it could do it maybe. But GitHub Actions or GitHub CI, a more full featured one, like I know Azure can do that easily.
So are we are we sure we need tests written in TypeScript, or can we just rely on if it compiles, it works? I guess that's my first question.
So I think, okay, so based on like the hesitation to like refactor anything or change anything, we could write a separate test in TypeScript and run it, and run the code as JavaScript as well. That would just make sure that we're not making dumb mistakes like the import is actually named incorrectly or things like that. But it won't test, obviously, everything that we think we're testing in the test suite until that TypeScript file slowly evolves to be basically the size of a test suite. But this might be a good enough place to start where we can actually just like test the types, test that like a basic import works, and go from there as like introductory.
Right, because to basically, Wes, is like what we're really talking about is like what level of testing are we actually looking for? What is the goal of the tests in the first place? Because like I said, you could just write TypeScript definition file and literally be done with it. It's all on the humans to figure that out. Then I feel like the next level of what I've seen is, just like what you were saying, what definitely typed kind of does, which I feel like is the intermediate step of just, you just have a file that just has a bunch of code, which you don't really technically run per se, and it just checks if it's typed. You could run it too, but then the problem is like over time, which is basically what Blake's pointing out, is to really test all the different inputs and outputs, of different types, you almost end up turning it into the size of your test suite as it is. So you basically then have two test suites of about equal size. There's a little nuance there, right? Because sometimes you don't, the TypeScript is, focused on the types, but still.
I'm not opposed to that as our plan. Would be starting with the tests that basically make sure it imports correctly, and then let users contribute when they make a new feature, both tests. I don't know if y'all feel we would want to require both tests or what, but it seems to me like that path forward is flexible, and we could decide with any given feature, if it doesn't touch what we think is the interface as much, or maybe we only touch the parts that, or we only test the parts that change in the interface when in the TypeScript tests or something.
Right. Yeah, it just puts more onus onto the human who's reviewing the pull request. Is what usually I feel like the trade-off is really, to recognize like, oh, you're slightly changing the type, or you got to update this type definition file or some other stuff. The other onus is on the human, is to recognize if someone's changing, like say the TypeScript definition, say in a certain way, that will suddenly prevent previously written TypeScript programs people wrote to no longer compile, because that's a major breaking that effectively is like, yeah, the TypeScript definition becomes part of our API. I feel like, so I've seen like some coworkers, like this was years ago, who had tried to use TypeScript, and they ran into that all the time, especially with definitely type stuff, where people would like completely change all the type definitions. And sure, they're kind of like the same on the human, but like their program literally stopped working because they referred to types in certain spots, and then they're like, what the crap?
We do not want to get into that road, I think.
But I'm just saying, like, it would be like, that would be something that we have to just keep in mind, just as reviewing the pull request when we add these type definitions, is that effectively the TypeScript definitions does become part of our public API. And I mean, I think like it's not necessarily a negative too, right? It's a positive as well, because that helps people who are trying to use our stuff with TypeScript, who then run into these problems with definitely typed, not run into them, because we can better control them as well. So I mean, it's a give and take. And that's especially why I kind of like mentioned with Blake that having like a good someone who uses TypeScript and say like, yeah, these are kind of like how you organize your TypeScript definitions. Like this is an interface and this is, you do, and you nest this and that, whatever the quote best practice is. I don't know. I'm not saying it's necessarily best. I don't know how opinionated it is, but still at least some consistent practice we could apply. So it doesn't turn out that we just naively, like someone like me, naively make a bunch of definitions that then it turns out are not super useful in the real world. And then like you have to refactor the whole thing. And then you end up like, oh, I guess we have to make a new major version of this thing for the TypeScript definitions, or, people just even, it just seems broken. So like that is kind of like one of the things that, I think that Blake could probably help us out on, and just like, yeah, like, kind of like the pattern of to make the interfaces and whatnot. So that way, hopefully we get it at least more right the first time than like if like I were just to try to type them out. Because I'm definitely not
typed. Definitely not typed.
Yeah, like I said, once they're made, I'm sure
I had to make that fun.
Yeah, like once they're made, it's just a syntax, and I can, because I've interacted with them before, like I can help, make for sure the pull requests and stuff, like, are updating things and it's making sense. It's usually just from what the patterns is where, it's like, it's just like when you talk about like making like, libraries in a bunch of languages, I could probably like say, write a library in Java. But a Java person who uses it might say, why is this named like this? Why is it using this pattern? That's stupid. Like, that's not what we do in Java. It's like, well, I'm not a Java person, so of course it doesn't make sense.
So Blake, does that sound like a good way forward for you?
Yeah, so to summarize, I'm gonna create an issue log. Do we have a list already of all of the repos that we want, or should I just go through them all?
I do. So the status board, I went through all 3 orgs and I compiled the projects that are actually active. So I think what we would want, and it would be to just take this list. And then actually what I'll add to this status board is I'll add a little section that checks for a types file, a typing, file, and displays it in this list. Which would just be a start, but then I think we need an issue that takes this out and documents the work to be done.
Okay, can you link me to that after this? Finding the types file will need to probably come from like package.json instead of a specific file name, but that should be fine.
Right? Yeah. I'll follow the pattern that is the correct one for discovering the file, but I'll post it in the.
Okay, so from that.
Well, actually, it's already.
Issue,
I'll post it.
Okay. From that issue, I'll create one example PR, probably on like whichever one is the first one with the least dependencies. I'll create an example that we can follow for future PRs, and that will probably just add this, the test types that we're describing, the type definition itself, and a way to run that. And then we can review that, iterate on that, and use that as the example for all the rest.
Sounds good. Because yeah, like I said, especially because technically you don't have to start the one that has the least dependencies, but just especially if there's one that then like, because a lot of our modules will shine through the interface of one of its dependencies. So of course, if that's the case, it's much nicer if the dependency has TypeScript definitions before the other one does. I think a very easy example is Express has express.static, which is literally serve static. So, and that's a good example of where having serve static typed prior to Express makes sense, because then it could probably just say, and it's this interface from its dependency directly, versus like then redoing the whole thing again inside of Express again. I assume you can do that.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's mainly the only reason why, from a technical level, to start lower and upper. It's really just for that reason. So really, like, you can start wherever feels good from that point. But yeah, so Yeah, as far as the maintenance group goes, because yeah, like to Wes's point, if we do want to essentially rally helpers to the cause, the more information we have, the better. Obviously, you can obviously don't have to go super far, but of course, I'm sure the closer you can get to spoon feeding it to them, the more successful that they'll probably be in the end. You know what I mean? Because just the more information they'll have to know what to do.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not saying to go that far per se, but just that's kind of like just the high level. Like the more, the better. Even just having the list of checkboxes, even though it might seem dumb, like those people might not even know what all the repos are, even know we have 3 orgs or anything like that, you know? So
I guarantee they don't. People do not know that. So,
right. So just giving them something, the more you can give, the better. If we want to rally a bunch of people to go chew them out, or knock those things out or whatever. So, we'll look at all. Of course, we'll be looking at the PRs and all that stuff too. So, and we'll figure it out from there. But cool. I think that gets pretty much all the TypeScript stuff we want to talk about. I don't know. Is there anything you want to reiterate real quick, Blake, in case you weren't 100% sure on what we decided on, or now everything's clear?
This is great. Let me know where I should create that issue, I guess, since we have 3 orgs with numerous people.
Probably just create it in the Express.js discussions.
Okay.
Probably the easiest place there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was actually looking when I added the TypeScript. I thought maybe we had made an issue, but I think we're just talking about it in the last week's meeting. So
we also have like maybe 5 or 6 other issues across the orgs
right.
that ask about typings, where we have had specific conversations about the approach, or what people want out of it, which might not hurt to link up if we can find it. So if you create the issue, we can I'll pour through and find them, because I know some places to look, and we can link them up just so that people have context if they're wondering why we're asking for help or something,
Right.
Yeah, I also just noticed that I had created this issue in the discussions. It's actually issue number 7 as well.
Oh, so there is one. I swear I thought there was one. I just did not look far enough.
So yeah, I can close that one in favor of the big large list, since there's not much there and things have changed a lot since 2016.
But yeah, I totally didn't even. So I need to go through, and I know there was discussions on it before. As really what anybody can do this. So when I say me, I don't know. Not saying I'm the only one who can do that. I just sometimes just do it by accident. But just go through and like update probably like the README with the list of the meetings and links to the YouTube videos, and then and something so we can just close all these stupid meeting issues that are over. We didn't at first because kind of like at least categorize them somewhere, and there is a README in this repo. There's no particular plan, so whoever does something first, that's the way it is. But if you're wondering, that's why kind of like the meetings are all just open. Even literally, if it's just a list where it says, here's all the meeting dates and a link to the closed Express discussion issue, is probably a good enough start to then close them, because then we at least have a little index of them we can then expand on later if we feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
So
we also have a meeting label here, so I will pull that into this status board and make a page of previous meetings. If you can't tell, I'm on the status board kick. I really think I think it will be a good resource to centralize all of this information. So
right. Well, that's one of the hard problems I feel like a lot is exposing the information.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the biggest problem right now. I think personally, that's my feeling, is onboarding new people. They just have to go so many places they wouldn't know where to look. So It's intimidating.
Right. I mean, it's similar when you change jobs even, or orgs within like a large company, you're like, oh, do this thing. You're like, I don't even know what that is. It's like, oh, well, it's in this weird esoteric place that no one told you existed.
Yep.
Now that
I've learned a little bit about that.
now that Zoom is being used, is it possible to just have like one team Zoom link that's on all the meetings? Make it a little bit easier to set those up?
Yeah, like I've never used Zoom before. I'd actually just ended up signing up just using my Google. So whatever, like I don't want to be the only person who can make the meeting either. And not only just the, issue in the discussions, but the actual meeting on the computer. So, I think that here, like I'm not super familiar with how the YouTube stuff works, but we're not even streaming it to YouTube at this point. So really at this point, especially with the Zoom, we don't have any plans or anything. I think that anybody could just make the meeting and then we can figure out what to do with like the recorded video and get it up on there ad hoc right now. But yeah, getting like a good story around that would help.
I think to the point is posting it sooner also helps for people because of our previous process was start it and then you get the link just because of the way the Hangouts worked. The nice thing about Zoom is that we can just have the link be constant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah, because
and we can, once we get that integrated, we can stream to YouTube straight from it. So.
Right. Yep. Because YouTube. Like you said, the problem there was like I can get the link for the public video early, but I can't get the link. I couldn't get the link for the Hangout until I actually started the Hangout.
Yep.
Which was annoying. So like you couldn't even.
So do you want to tackle? Are we ready to? All right.
Yep,
Can we move on, or do we have enough time? Are people happy with?
So we're not limited to 40 minutes, is what it told me. So we don't have that hanging over us. I probably only have probably 15 minutes ish before I have to go. But
that's fine to me.
I think that we can easily at least do one more topic here. I didn't know which one you wanted to do because it sounded like you might.
Personally, well, I think the idea of using the node Slack was just a really quick one. So maybe we could just quickly see if.
Sure.
The reason I brought this up was I had been thinking about a few things and I wasn't really ready to open issues. And I've been using this Node.js Slack group just as like I'm there. The package maintenance working group has a channel in it. Security working group has a channel. There is an Express channel, but it's mostly users just asking things. So I went in today and posted like, hey, the TC meeting's starting. But if we all were in it, then I think it would be easy for us to have a more like real-time thing, which I think is sometimes nice when, like I said, I had an idea for a couple of things that I like moving the request out of the prototype out was like, I would have loved to not do all the work and say, hey, what do people think about this? But because it's so much overhead to make an issue, like not having real time, I don't know. I just thought using the Slack channel might be a nice way for us to also communicate in more real time stuff.
No, yeah, I agree. We had the getter set up, and back a long time ago, that was originally the idea. It just kind of sucks a little bit in that where like they'll send you an email if someone says something, but you weren't around, but it's like really delayed. I don't even know if they have an app or not, but I mean Slack.
The one other they do have an app, but one other problem with Gitter is it's a single channel.
Well, we do have private channels too, but the thing is that yeah, they're kind of useless. So I definitely think having it is a good idea, and that I think the modern age is just to use Slack. So really, if we just can get like a channel in that Slack, that's good enough, I think. And I would certainly.
I'm pretty sure we can. Yeah, I mean, we could. I don't really want to use the existing Express.js one because it is. It's just mostly people asking for help, and we already get enough of that on the issues that it's like more than we need. But I feel like having a special Express TC or Express maintainers room, I think we would be able to do.
Right. Yep. I definitely agree that yeah, because I mean the simplest solution is if we can put a work channel in there called like just at least for now like Express-TC or something like that. I don't even know what is the workspace name for that Node.js one.
Node.js. So you can apply, I think, on the website. Like you have to submit a thing, and it just sends you a link.
Oh,
Pretty
okay.
sure it's on the website. Like on the Node.js website, where'd it go?
So there's
the
people talking publicly in there, but it's not technically a public Slack. I gotcha.
Yeah, yep. So I think it's like maybe under get involved. Yeah, here it is. I just saw it. Where'd it go?
But cool. I mean,
Anyway, I'll post a link to it.
I mean, I think that's a fine idea, especially compared to Gitter. Blake, what do you think? Like, would you use it or not? Or not even like, would you per se, but do you feel like you would at least? Or you're indifferent?
Might be indifferent. I don't know. I used to have like so many Slack groups and message groups, but I've like mostly died on everyone now. But if someone adds me and I get an email, I'll probably pop in.
Cool. So, I mean, it sounds like we might as well just try it. No harm really, but
okay. I'll post a link to the invite page then.
Yeah, I mean, I have Slack open all the time in general, so I'd probably at least, have it in there. Certainly more than Gitter.
Yeah, me too. That was the thing. I had too many apps, and so the Gitter app got moved off my home screen on my phone, and I forgot to check it for like 6 months.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, everybody like Slack is just like exploded in popularity. So,
yep. Okay, then I'll post a link and I'll talk to. I think I can reach out to somebody who's an admin and have them create a room if we can't. I don't know if we can, but
cool.
Cool. And then the only other one that we haven't. Oh, so go ahead, sir.
I was gonna say, like, even if, like, as far as I know, workspace, you only have to ask the workspace if you want a public room. We should be able to make a private room, even because like a lot of times you can just DM each other and then like convert it into a room at minimum. So I think we should
that would work
at least make a private room ourselves once we get in there.
Oh, hey. Oh, I didn't know. You're an admin. He just invited me in the Slack group. Awesome. Good. I'm glad that was easy. Perfect. We have an Express.TC channel.
Sweet.
Yeah. Okay. That solves that. Cool. So anyway, the only last one that we haven't talked at all about is this rec one. Do we want to take the last couple seconds and just see if it resonates with people?
Yeah.
Like if people like the idea.
There's a lot it's definitely a lot going on in it. I think I think we didn't really talk about it last time either, just because of that.
It's a big one. It's been pushed.
Yeah. And I'm not against it so that's my point there. But I think like maybe we could probably like make that as the first topic for next meeting, so we know we have enough time for it. And / maybe, we might end up getting some points talked about on the Slack even by that time, if we're going to do the Slack thing.
Yeah, that sounds.
See where that goes. But otherwise, I think maybe we'll just have that. Maybe we'll start off with this one for sure next time, because like I said, there's a lot to even digest in it. I've read it and I have it pulled up in front of me, so it's not like I don't know what it is. The main thing,
that's fine. It is a big. That's why I kept on putting it on, but I it wasn't the most important of the topics.
Right. But it's
a lot of details.
Yeah, and it is needed in the end because, me and you have talked a little bit about it, the wrapper kind of thing, which you mentioned in there too, and other points into it. And, we even touched on it when we talked about, thoughts on moving modules under like, NPM namespaces and things like that. So, yeah, and it's definitely, like you said, compared to a lot of the other stuff, not as an immediate of a need, but still something we should definitely talk on and figure out what we want to figure out a game plan here, because it does need to be done in some form, I think.
Okay, well then, yeah, let's put that as the first agenda item next time, and we can. I'm fine doing 2 weeks if everybody else is.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that's the original. That was the original cadence when we first started these. Was supposed to be every other week. But all right. Well, then I guess if we don't have any other topic, then I guess or at least within the time frame, I guess we'll go ahead and end this meeting and figure out how to upload it to YouTube. But all right, well, I'm going to stop the recording.